What's up, YouTube? This is Guy, and today I am fortunate enough to have on the review table a watch on loan. It is none other than a Fortis B42 Chronograph. This is, without a doubt, a really cool watch, and I'm super excited to have had it loaned to me to do this review, and yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy checking it out. Fortis is a Swiss watchmaker founded in something like 1912, very early 1900s, and they're probably an underappreciated Swiss watch brand from what I know about it, and my knowledge on this brand is somewhat limited. This is my first experience checking out one of their watches, and so far I can say that I'm pretty impressed with it. The one in particular, the one that we're talking about today, is again the B42 Chronograph, reference number 635.110.41 L16. Now, that was the reference number that was given to me by the owner of this watch. I don't believe this watch is in production anymore, and when I was doing my research to figure out all of the specifications about this watch, I Googled that reference number, and I came up with something a little bit different. I'll roll in a picture of it. I'm not 100% sure if it's the correct reference number, because the pictures that come up online for this watch in association with that number look slightly different. If you look really closely, you'll see that, in particular, the handset on the watch in this picture, it's not exactly the same as the handset on the watch that was loaned to me. Other than that, though, they look to be pretty much identical. So if that's not the correct reference number, I apologize, but it probably is. Maybe there was just some variations at some point or something along those lines. Now again, this watch is not currently in production. I looked on the Fortis website and I can't find it available anymore, which is a shame because based on what they do have in production, I prefer the design of this one more. I might be in the minority. I mean, they probably know their business and they made the decision to change it for whatever reason, but the one that looks most similar is the Flieger Professional Chronograph, reference 705.21.11, and I'll roll in an image of that. There's no tachometer on the inner bezel of the one that is currently in production, of that Flieger Professional. They also have the official Cosmonaut version. That one has an elapsed time bezel to go along with the chronograph, but it does have the tachometer on that inner bezel or inner chapter ring area. I'm not a huge fan of the idea of having an elapsed time bezel along with a chronograph with a tachometer. It's just, I don't know, it's too much. You know, that's, I guess, the official wristwatch of the Russian space program, though, and for whatever reason, maybe they dictated that that's what they wanted. Just for me personally, I like the one that I have here on loan a whole lot better. It's a very, very clean, simple, straightforward layout and design. Frankly, it's awesome. It's not without a few negatives, though, and in particular, one of those negatives we'll talk about right now when we talk about the specifications of this watch. The watch's dimensions. It's a big, beefy watch. Now, the diameter of the case is only 42 millimeters, so that's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. The lugs are 20 millimeters, which is good. The place where it gets a little squirrely for me is the thickness. This is a great, big, thick, beefy watch at 15.5 millimeters thick. It's like an Oreo double stuff or something. It's a monster. It stands off the wrist really far. But it is a robust tool watch, and I'm not going to hold that against it too much. You know, it's just a bit thick. The last dimension to talk about is the lug-to-lug, from the top of the lugs to the bottom of the lugs, or of course what I like to call a watch's wingspan. If you're familiar with the channel, you know that that's what I refer to that dimension as. That comes in at 53 millimeters on my calipers. So that's a little large too. The moral of the story is that this watch does wear big on the wrist, and it is probably supposed to be that way. Like I said, it's a very, very rugged, robust tool watch, so it's not too bad. It's just it's a little heavy, particularly on a leather strap. When it's riding on your wrist, it feels a bit top heavy. Other information about this, specs quickly. This uses the ETA 7750 Valjoux movement. It's a chronograph movement that, as I understand it, is basically as ubiquitous as the ETA 2824. It's been in production since the early 1970s, and tons of watches use that movement. It seems to be a very good movement. It runs at 28,800 beats or vibrations per hour, 25 joule movement. It's got a 42-hour power reserve, features a day and date complication. It's available in 3 grades, the elaborate, top, and chronometer grades. I'm not sure which grade is present in this particular example, probably the elaborate, but what that means, if I'm not mistaken, is that because it's not one of the lower grades, most ETA movements, well, maybe not most, but some ETA movements have as many as 5 grades. Once you get up into this elaborate area, I guess what you're looking at is a movement that is adjusted from the factory in more positions than just the one. So this is adjusted in 3 positions, which should give you better overall accuracy. And in my research, what I found is that you should be getting around plus or minus 15 seconds per day in any given position with this movement. But then there's something about no more than maybe plus 5 deviation. I don't know exactly. Finding out the accuracy specs on this watch was a little bit difficult. Suffice to say, though, that I was told by the owner of this watch that this watch does keep very, very good time. And in the research that I did online, people talking about not only this watch, but the movement that's in it is, they're very accurate. So, that's about the best that I can tell you as far as the movement goes. Now, other features, this watch does have 200 meter water resist, which is interesting for a non-diver. You don't see that too often. The crystal is excellent. It's a, I believe, double anti-reflective coated sapphire crystal. I'm not sure if it's just on the top layer or if it's both double layers. But the crystal is just fantastic on this watch. Now this particular example, as I shine it in the light, you'll probably notice there's a few little scuffs on the AR coating. But if you can ignore those like you would on a brand new one, it's like the crystal is not even there. It is so transparent, which makes this watch incredibly legible. It's outstanding. It's one of, if not maybe the best looking crystal that I have seen on a watch. We do have a display case back on the rear side of the watch, showing off that 7750 movement. Not particularly attractive or decorated, but interesting nonetheless. I believe this movement is also only unidirectional winding. I don't think it winds bidirectionally. If you guys know the answer to that to be incorrect, go ahead and correct me down in the comment section below, but my research did come to the conclusion that it is not a bidirectional winding automatic movement. Last but not least, we do have luminescent paint on the markers and the handset on this watch. And maybe it's because this is an older model, I'm not sure. I'll roll in some video of the lume on this guy. I'm not super impressed with it. It's functional, but not nearly as bright as many other watches that I've had experience with, not the least of which is the Rolex Explorer that I've previously reviewed, and even most of my Seikos. The lume is just a little bit brighter, but it does feature luminescence. First thing I want to talk about on this guy is the case, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom the camera in a little bit so I'm not moving back and forth so much. We'll talk about the case, we'll talk about all of the design features, functionality, everything that I normally discuss in my videos. So give me 1 second to zoom the perspective in just a little bit closer. Now, despite the fact that this is, again, a pretty large presentation, in particular of that thickness dimension, something really interesting about the case is the finish. If we look really closely at it, and of course this is, a used watch, it's not brand new, so it's got some battle scars, it's been well loved and well worn, but the thing that I'm really kind of surprised about is the quality of the finish. I'm not sure if it's brushed or if it's bead blasted. And the reason that I say that is because if this is a brushed finish, it is the smoothest, most satiny, silky, matte brushed finish I've ever seen, which makes me think that maybe it's bead blasted because I've never seen brushing like this. It is fantastic. If again, if it's brushed or bead blasted, that's irrelevant. We'll just say that it's satin for lack of more of a confirmation. The satin finish throughout this entire watch. There is no polished portions at all. It looks awesome. It doesn't really reflect light, it kind of almost absorbs it. Like you see from my studio lights how the reflection is coming off there on this lower left side. It just sort of soaks up light. It's really an attractive, again, silky, satiny, smooth finish. I think I've never seen brushing like this. If it is a brushed finish, it's awesome. It's outrageously good. The backside of the case also, it's got that same sort of finish on the screw down case back. And we can see that there is a little bit of branding on the rotor of the movement there, as well as the Fortis B42 Chronograph information, and then water resistant 20 atmospheres on the other side there. So overall though, I really am impressed with the fit and finish of this case. The sizing, again, it's a little beefy, it's a little chunky, but outstanding as far as fit and finish goes. The crown on this, and I have the crown pulled out so as the time won't be running for a few minutes, but the crown on it is very big. It's not screwed down, but excellent, easy to get a hold of. It sets the time as you would expect. It's very smooth, very fluid. We also have pushers for the chronograph functionalities at the top and bottom here. They don't have any screw down functionality either, but they are very positive in the actuation of the buttons. I gotta say, everything about this watch feels like excellent quality. Definitely 2 thumbs up when we talk about the fit and finish of this guy. Next thing I want to discuss on this is the dial, the handset, the chronograph subdials, the day-date complication, all of that stuff. I really do like the layout of this dial. You have this really attractive matte black dial with subdials at the 12, 6, and 9 position that are sort of recessed down into the flat dial. Of course, we have the day and date over at the 3 o'clock position along with the Fortis branding. Arabic numerals 1 through 12. Well, we have a triangle up at the 12 position, and there's no numerals at the 3, 6, or 9, but numerals that are super legible. That's one of the big keywords for this watch, is legibility. Everything on it is extremely legible, including the subdials. Now, I have relatively bad eyesight, and I've had a number of chronograph watches where it's like I can't even read the subdials. Not the case on this one. The subdial at the 12 o'clock is for the chronograph functionality. It's a 30-minute counter. The subdial at the 6 o'clock area is also for the chronograph. It's a 12-hour counter, and I have no problems at all seeing where the hand is pointing to on either of those dials. And then finally over at 9 o'clock we have the active running seconds counter. I'll go ahead and push the crown in, and you can see that the active running seconds takes off. It is extremely smooth, running at that 28,800 vibrations per hour. Looks fantastic, works fantastic. There is, again, a chapter ring on this watch, and then sort of, an outer flange area. And on a Rolex, you'd call that, I think, the rehaut, and that's where they type or engrave the word Rolex over and over. On this watch, though, you see you have a tachometer there, 50, 240, 200, 180, and it goes all the way around. That is interesting in that, most of the time your tachometer is an external fixed bezel, but it is actually inside the watch on the, again, I don't know if you'd call that the flange or part of the chapter ring, but nevertheless, that's in there. You do have a chapter ring with Arabic numerals for the current minutes, 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on, as well as nice hash marks. The markers at each of the hours will get really close in there. They're these little square pips, applied markers. Those feature luminescence material, as well as the applied indices, the 1 through 12. Just an excellent layout. It's very field watch-like, and I'm a big fan of field watches, so this dial is obviously something that I like quite a bit. Again, we do, obviously, like I said, have a chronograph functionality. We have the 3 subdials there, 2 of which are for the functioning of the chronograph. Your top pusher here is what starts it, and I'll go ahead and get it running. It's a very stiff but positive actuation on the button, and the chronograph takes off. The running chronograph hand features a, I don't know if red or orange, half colorblind. We'll call it orange, a bright orange tip for, I don't know, really it's more than the tip. It's about 2/3 of the chronograph hand. Interesting thing about that is it matches the hands on the 30-minute and the 12-hour subdials. So you know those are the chrono hands or subdials. And then the current active running second dial over at the 9 o'clock position there, it's got a white tip, which matches up with your current hour and minute markers. By the way, I don't think I really touched on those hands. They're pretty straightforward. They're a little bit plain, but there's so much going on in this watch that I think that that's good, that they're just basic, kind of like stick hands or almost like fence post hands. They're not very elaborate and they're not distracting. I think that was a good design choice there. As the chronograph runs, your 30-minute counter obviously ticked over there to the first minute and continues to go. The top button again will stop it, and then resetting the chronograph is the bottom button. Those subdials and the main counting hand just snap back to the 12 o'clock position very, very quickly and positively. The date and date windows are pretty well done. There's no outlining or anything, but if you notice the arrows to the right and left, one pointing up and one pointing down, that's kind of interesting. When we pull the crown out to the first position to quick set the day and day, if you spin the dial in the direction of the arrow, you can see that it changes the date. If you spin it the other direction in the arrow by the day, it flips the day. It's quite common on watches that I'm accustomed to, like Seiko watches, to have multiple languages on the day wheel, but this does not. It just has the single language for each day in English. If I'm being honest, I think that that's preferable. I have no use for any secondary languages, so I like that quite a bit. Reseat the crown, obviously, by pushing it in. Since it's not screwed down, you definitely want to make sure that that crown is pushed back down entirely before you tempt fate and get this watch wet. See if it can withstand the 200 meters of water resist that is advertised. This watch is on an aftermarket strap. My buddy that loaned it to me, he said it was a Xeno watch strap. I don't have the original strap, but he said that the original strap is very, very similar to this. So give you basically the idea of the type of strap this watch would have come on, more or less the same thing as we have here. But I won't touch on that too long, considering that's not the actual original strap. So, that's basically a look at the Fortis watch. It is fantastic. It's beautiful. Again, it's not without a couple of negatives, the main one being this great big chunky case. It is super thick. But it's interesting if you look at the lugs here, how they kind of hook down. So it does kind of, and the case back doesn't bulge out really. It's not like very bulbous. So just because of the shape of the lugs and the flatness of the case back, it does ride low to the wrist. It's just, it's thick, 15 plus millimeters. You get what you get. You guys know how it works. But yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to go over here on this Fortis B42 Chronograph. It is a beautiful watch. I think I'm a little surprised that they're not more, popular or more broadly discussed online. I don't see the name come up a whole lot in message boards, Facebook groups, and on other YouTube channels. So I'm super happy to have had the opportunity to check this out. As always, if you guys like this video, click that little button. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Down in the notes section below this video is links to all of my social media accounts. If you want to hook up with me over there, go ahead, jump over there and do that. I'd appreciate it. And I'll be back later on, probably next week, with another watch review video. Bye, guys.